One thing we might ask is, where might we see this universal hierarchy of harmony make itself manifest? You see it most fundamentally, experience it most fundamentally, in the case of music. Music is intrinsically meaningful, and that intrinsic meaning of music isn't subject to rational criticism. It circumvents rational criticism. It's more fundamentally real than anything rational criticism can undermine. And that's really something remarkable. And I think the reason for that is that music replicates the structure of the world, in that the world is made out of hierarchies of patterns, and those patterns can interact harmoniously. That's what happens in a musical piece. And then the musical piece will compel you to align yourself with that harmonious pattern of movement. And that emergent, harmonious alignment, well, people love that, right? That's why people go to rock concerts. The great musicians can integrate themselves psychologically with their band members, pursuing some musical idea, and they can pull in the whole crowd, and everyone's doing that all at once and moving simultaneously. And people love that. That's success. Can't remember whose idea this was originally, that all art aspired to the condition of music. It's like, well, I think all life aspires to the condition of music. Let's get cynical about this for a minute. You might say, well, this is all well and good, but, you know, why the hell shouldn't this just be all about me? Why shouldn't I just be selfish? And I think the answer to that is, well, what do you mean by selfish? Like, do you mean that the you that wants something right now should always get it? Because that's actually going to be problematic for the extended you. Now, psychopaths are very selfish. They also don't do very well across time. They don't learn from experience, and their life trajectory tends to be very negative. The problem with the psychopath is twofold. He betrays other people, and he betrays his future self. And those are the same thing. And this is a realization very much worth having. Why shouldn't you be selfish? Well, because it's not in your interest. If every time someone plays with you, they win a little more than you do, people will be lining up to play with you your whole life. So how is that not success? If you're a little generous at the margins for every single game of 100 games, the total victory that you will accrue across those 100 games is going to be incomparably greater than the thrill of any given victory. Now, this is also why people tell their children, doesn't matter whether you win or lose, it matters how you play the game. Don't get too greedy to take all the credit, and don't get too whiny if you lose the game. Try to comport yourself in a manner that indicates that you're a good person to have around, and you're a lot of fun on the playing field, right? You support your fellow teammates. You're trying hard to win because that's what you're there for. You've got enough emotional coherence so you don't have a fit if things don't go your way. You want to show some magnificence of character. Well, that's how you win. The problem with selfishness isn't that it's selfish, it's that it's narrowly conceived selfishness. It's what I want now. Why do you reflexively identify with the I that wants now? You're hungry, you're sexually deprived, you're angry. It's like, why is that I exactly? Now, someone impulsive does think that way, but what's happening is the impulse itself has gripped the identity of the actor. And it's gripped it so completely that the actor now identifies with the impulse without even noticing that the impulse isn't the superordinate I. It's just an impulse. And so you might say, I want what I want now. But a more truthful statement is, something within me has possessed me and pushed me in this direction. And I'm accepting that without objection because I'm too ignorant psychologically to notice. Now, you know this is true, you know? You have a fight with your wife, who you love, theoretically, and you say, like, nasty things. And they might be nasty enough so that you ask yourself afterwards, and so does she, where the hell did that come from? And that's a good question. Because the anger seizes you and takes you over, and then it convinces you that you are the anger, or that you're no more than the anger. and then you act that impulse out. And you might say, well, I got what I wanted. It's like, no. The fragmentary motivational state of anger got what it wanted. You know, imagine it's New Year's and you've made a resolution to go to the gym, and the cheesecake-loving eye takes you to the cheesecake restaurant instead of to the gym. And you might say, well, I got what I wanted. It's, well, you didn't really, did you? Because the more forward-looking you, the more integrated you, the you that required more discipline and a longer-term view, was defeated by the fat and sugar-seeking you. And you're going to experience that as an ego defeat, right? That's going to be embarrassing and shameful. And the reason for that is because that more primordial desire, less sophisticated, less iterable, less social, attained a victory over the so-called higher self. When you say, well, I just want it to be about me, you gotta be careful not to fall into a very unsophisticated conception of what the you that gets everything it wants actually is. Women check men out for that sort of ability on the dance floor. So you're out there matching yourself to the harmonies of the world on the dance floor, and you're playing that out with her and attending to her, and she's seeing if you have enough grace to play with her while dancing and enough sense to sort of match yourself to the rhythm. But she's also seeing, well, are you so wildly attracted to her that you can't regulate your impulses? It's like, do you have enough sense to keep your hands to yourself for like 15 seconds? And if the answer is no, well, the woman you're with should have every reason to question your ability to regulate yourself in a sophisticated way. We're checking each other out for this sort of higher order regulation capacity all the time in ways we don't understand at all. We could talk too a little bit about the difference between success for men and women. I would say, first of all, probably don't understand that as well as we might. The big difference between men and women, or a big difference, is that socioeconomic status makes men attractive to women, but doesn't make women attractive to men. The correlation between perceived socioeconomic status and attractiveness for men, measured as opportunities for sexual interaction, it's a pretty cut and dried measure, is like 0.6. For women, it's either 0 or slightly negative. Now, it may be slightly negative because more successful women are intimidating to men, and whereas with men, it's the primary hallmark of attractiveness to women. So that's a huge difference between the sexes. If you've been socioeconomically successful in a relatively well-functioning society, that's an indication of your competence, not of your wealth. And what women are after in men is competence. So that's another issue to be considering for men who are trying to contemplate what might constitute success. Is it's very useful for men to develop a high level of competence in at least one thing. It's extraordinarily useful as a disciplinary process, but it's also one of the things that does make you genuinely attractive to, well, to members of the opposite sex, not least. Certainly, it's also the case that it makes you attractive socially to other men, because men with sense admire competence. Now, that option isn't available to women. What you seem to see happen with women, this is the pattern as far as I can tell, is that women are enjoined to develop their career, and they're impelled to believe that there'll be nothing more important for them in their life than their career. Now, that's a lie. That's not even true for most people, let alone most women. To be hyper successful at a given career, you have to be very, very smart. You have to be very conscientious. And then you have to be willing to work 80 hours a week. Maybe the payoff for that is worth it. Now, I knew some female professors at Harvard who were very competent women. They were among the first women to ever be granted tenure at Harvard. And they had very successful careers. But the women I knew also paid a big price for that on the personal front. They were often childless. And it wasn't at all obvious to me that that was in their best interests. And I say that with trepidation because they were great psychologists. But man, it's a hell of a sacrifice. And certainly in my case, I got a pretty good career as a psychologist and a researcher, as good as it gets, really. I didn't win a Nobel Prize. But as far as having a career that was sort of multidimensionally beneficial, I had great students at the undergraduate level. I had great graduate students. I liked my colleagues. I was a popular teacher. I did a lot of interesting research. I was successful at applying for grants, and I worked at great universities. So that's about as good as it gets. I still can't say that that was more important to me than my kids and my family. They complemented each other very well. I liked the balance. But if push came to shove, I prioritized my family over my career. And I think women are more likely to do that than men. And I think that's because there are a smaller percentage of women pursue that hyper-successful perfectionism. And that's because the payoff for them just isn't as great. The law firms I worked with in Toronto, I was a consultant for law firms for about 10 years. And one of the things I learned was that law firms, large law firms, couldn't keep their female partners after they were about 30. And they'd go get a 9-to-5 job, paying much less usually. Well, why? Well, first of all, many of them were married, almost always married to men who made more money than them. They had plenty of money. That wasn't a problem. They wanted to have a life, and it was also shocking to some of these women what happened to them as well when they had a baby. I had one client, I liked her a lot. She was kind of a Sex in the City type, and she was 32 or 33, something like that, when she had the baby. She said, I just thought of children as decorative when I was like 26. I thought, well, at some point I'll have a child. It was sort of like having a purse, another fashion accoutrement. And I thought that was pretty damn funny. But then she had this baby, and it turned out she liked him. Surprise, surprise. Because one of the things you don't understand, especially if you're really career-oriented, is that there isn't anyone that you like better than your children.